Hey guys, Jerry with Backwoods Animation, and today I've got a tutorial about character animation. I'm going to walk you through my process of how I create very smooth pose-to-pose animation. We're going to rely very heavily on the curve editor to get that really smooth look, that polished look that you're probably looking for. As a bonus, I'm going to show you a way that you can recycle that animation at any point that you want very easily by just clicking a button. And that's going to be using Do It Basel. Now this is part of a much larger tutorial. If you want to see the whole thing, where I walk through more pose-to-pose animations, and also if you want to know how I do the shoulder rotation and the squash and stretch in the body, take my Skillshare course. The links are in the bottom in the description. I think that course will be very useful for you. But yeah, feel free to check it out, and I hope you enjoy this video. Let's get into it. So step one, we're going to start with one action. I'm going to do my character to his left. So I'm going to pose him in this direction, kind of as if, you know, he's speaking to somebody next to him. And you can see that there's like some breakage on the rig. That's something that I'll clean up later. This isn't a final rig for me. This is just a working process. I actually have a final rig of this character, so I'm not too worried about it. I'll leave that to you to actually clean up your own rigs. So now that I have my character positioned in the way that I want him to, maybe I'll move the eyes over like he's actually talking to somebody. What we're going to do is I'm going to do a hand shrug, almost like he's responding to somebody or even saying something. And the way to do this is we do it in sections. So I'm going to estimate that this first movement is, I don't know, maybe 20 frames. And just so that you're aware, my composition settings are, this is a 1920 by 1080 composition, and I'm animating at 29.97 seconds. Some people animate at 24 frames per second, some people animate at 12 frames per second. It's really up to you, or it's up to the client. I prefer to animate on the higher end, just in case, I don't know, you never know if you're gonna need that higher frame rate for some reason. But you can always downgrade using a posterized time effect. Anyway, long story short, let's get into it. Let's have some fun. So with most movements, what we're going to do is we're going to key the position and rotation of the body. And I'm going to play around with some of the timing here. Also, another thing to keep in mind is I have my hands and my head parented to the body. So use the pick whip. This is just going to keep things very simple, very easy. Okay, and I'm going to rotate him forward just a little bit. That looks pretty good. And all my movements are going to be very subtle. Sometimes you might want very large movements. You might want very exaggerated and animated movements. And that's fine too. For the sake of what I'm doing with this character, everything's going to be rather subtle. But I think it's going to read just fine. So I'm going to select my position and my rotation, and I'm going to move these. I'm at the edit speed graph. You might be at the edit value graph. I'm not worried about that now. Right now I'm worried about the speed. And we want to make this little mountain, almost like a steep ramp up and then a long curve in. And we're just going to look at this and we're going to see what he does. All right, that's not too bad, but I think his legs bend a little bit too much. So maybe what I'll do is I'll get rid of some of this curve here, and maybe I'll start him standing a little bit higher. So I'll select my positions and I'll bump them up just a little bit. I don't mind a little bit of leg bend. You just want to make sure it's not too much, because nobody bends down that far to do a subtle gesture. All right, now that we have that movement out of the way, let's go ahead and add some movement to the body. So we'll hit P on the keyboard, and I want his body to move up and over. And what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to pull this first movement down. I want him to really squash down and then kind of pop up. I'll hit F9, and then we can adjust these keyframes, or these speed values as well. So let's just see what's happening here. There we go. This gives us some movement in the shoulders and a very subtle squash to it. You don't see it too much, which is a good thing. All right, and then the head, let's go ahead and move the head around too. We'll do position and rotation. I'll rotate it forward a little bit, and then I'll move it upward and over. There we go. We'll hit F9. Come in here and we'll do the same thing. Let's adjust the speed values. Just like so. And then I'm going to do a little something different on the rotation. So as the head, as he comes into his first gesture, I think maybe I want the head to rotate downward. You know, he's like building up. So let's see. If we pull up on this rotation value, it's going to push it downward first and then up. Or maybe that didn't work. I think it's because I have it rotating down. Maybe I'll get that effect with the joystick. But if I pull this down, you can see now his head goes backward, which might work. You know, it gives a little more flair to his movement. So you can see if you pull down on the rotation, his head begins to rotate backwards before it goes forward. So it comes back and then in. That's pretty good. All right, now I'm going to animate the head. So I'm going to hit P on the keyboard, come over here, and this one I want to come up and maybe over. And you guys have to keep in mind too that whatever neutral pose you start on, that's the neutral pose that we're going to keep throughout our entire animation. So if you don't like the way that your character is standing in the first frame, you better change it now. Otherwise, you're kind of locked into this position. Because of the way that the animations line up, they all piggyback, or they all start off this original starting pose. So just make sure that it's nice. Make sure you like the way that the character is standing. Next, what we'll do is we'll come here and we'll pull the head down again, just like we did for the neck. And then let's see what we got. Crunch these in. And let's have a look. There we go. It's got a nice little bounce to it. All right, next what we're going to do This character has two hands set up, the back of the hand, and then I also have like a front of the hand or a palm. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to leave my palm exposed because the body is turned, so you'll see the inside of the hand. And I'm going to reverse the rotation of the IK path. So now the arm bends backwards. Okay, so I'm going to do those two things. And now I'm going to animate this hand. So I'm going to animate the position and the rotation. The hand will come upward. I'm going to do very, very subtle movement on this one. Maybe I'll put it here. So the character is going to raise his hand like, what are you talking about? And then maybe I'll have another hand drop as like a subtle inflection of the hand. Maybe he's like giving a gesture of like excitement or something. So let's just see how these things look. I'll move it here actually. Hit F9, crunch these in, and you can see that everything's kind of moving at the same wavelength. Kind of the same pattern, and that's by design. You kind of want, what I could even do is now that I have my A to B pose, just select all these, and then I'll unanimously or at a single moment move them all at once. All right, so we're getting some good movement here. I'm going to change the arcs in the hand. You want them to kind of drop down a little bit. You want to have a nice curvature to it. And then the rotation. And again, this is going to be a cool place that we get some nice rotation. So as the hand comes out, I want the palm to kind of drop downward. So if I raise up on this rotation, you can see the hand is now dropping backward. And that's going to give that kind of inertia to it. See that? It looks so good. And I can even push it in so it's going to rotate slower. So let's look at it. There we go. Gives the illusion that it's moving through space. And I think what I can do is once your character hits this pose here, maybe I'll have him come back just very subtle. And then I'll rotate it this way. And I'll do a little drop here. Okay, and so the way that I animate, just so you're familiar, is I try to keep everything in line with each other. So all my keyframes are here at 0, all my keyframes are here now at 20, and all my keyframes would then be at, whatever my next frame rate's going to be. I'm not sure if I'm going to stick with this or not, but it keeps it very clean. It keeps all your movements very uniform and unique. If you don't do that, you can have some very strange movements that don't look right, which is not the effect we're going for. And then maybe the head will move this way and up. And so we're just looking for very subtle, unique changes to the acting, so it makes it look like your character's alive and thinking. So now let's just hit this and see what
what happens. Okay, so that's something good. It looks good. So what I'm going to do is select these guys, and I'm going to hold a little bit more on this section here. So the lower the valley, deep down in here, the slower it moves. So this is almost a hold right in here, these 3 frames. It's almost a hold to where he's not moving. And then he's going to do his little movement here. Let me go ahead and animate the body as well. So we have these unique abilities to actually get subtle animation using the things at our disposal, like the joysticks and sliders. And the next thing I want to do is basically whenever you have something moving, let's say that your torso is the one leading. If your torso is the object on the body that's leading the animation, meaning it has the most weight, everything is counter-animating to it. So if the body pushes backwards, that means that the head will probably rotate forward. And what I'll do is I'll grab my rotation for the head, and now I want it to drop. So it'll drop forward before it moves back. So now let's watch it and see what happens. All right, not too bad. It's starting to really loosen it up. We could probably drop it even more. So as you get these nice bends in there and things are moving, it really breaks up that animation and it gives it that feel that it's alive and moving. And I think I want to offset the head from the body. So right now the body position and the head position, they're rotating on the same wavelength. So what I'll do is maybe I'll push the body movement forward a little bit so it moves first. So this peak, the peak is the bulk of the movement. That's where it's moving the quickest. And I'll push the head rotation forward a little bit. So now it's moving a little bit delayed from the body. All right, cool. And so now that the hand comes up, maybe I'll raise it up again like he's preparing to give his big final what kind of moment. And that's where the hand's gonna drop down. So at this point, he's winding up for the pitch, and then he's gonna give the pitch. And I can have it maybe drop down a little bit too. So explore the movements. So have fun with it. Don't have everything just locked into an arc. You can break it up. You see, so now we're gonna have a drop and then lift. And I'll grab these keyframes and let's look at what we got. Hit F9, and there we go. And again, let's look at the rotation of the hand. So as the hand comes up, what do you think it's gonna do? Well, in this case, actually I have the hand dropping. Let's make sure that that's what I want. Let's look. Yeah, not too bad. Okay, so as the hand drops, that means that the hand will rotate upward. Oops. It'll rotate upward. So let's see. And then it'll rotate downward. So let's see if we can get this down to drop. Let's just see what this looks like. It's very subtle. I don't know if it's quite working that well. Let's just see if we go the other way, what happens. All right, that's a little too much. Yeah, I think I'll go the other way. We'll have it drop down first. All right, I've definitely done something wrong with that. But let's look at, we'll just do very subtle. This might be too much movement for what I'm trying to do. Let's see, I'm going to try to just get that drop out of here. Maybe I can have a subtle drop, just not so much. Okay. So now let's look. There we go. I think that's going to look better. All right, and then we have him lift up, and then I'm going to have him now drop. Come up, and then he's going to drop his hand downward. This is him kind of putting the period on the end of the sentence, or the exclamation point. Okay, and we'll rotate. And again, all I'm doing is finding where I want him to end, and then I'm adding the key poses. Okay, so it's not necessarily about finding the right movement just yet, it's about finding the right pose. All right, and so now that I have all that done, I'm going to select the keyframes, hit F9, and I'm going to come in here, and I'm going to move all these. I want this one to be a little more delayed. So what does that mean? That means that I want, from this keyframe here, where it ends, I want it to be a very subtle movement and then a kind of a large explosion down into his final position. So that means that the spike's going to be right here at the end. And let's just see how that looks. Not too bad. I think maybe I'll move these in a couple frames. And then right here, I'm going to go out. Let's go out like maybe 8 frames. 8. And what I'll do is I'll then move my body upward. Then I'll move the head upward. I'll move that head up. I'll move that body up. But then I also want to adjust maybe the head rotation just a little bit upward. And I'll leave the body rotation as is. And then the hand's going to come up too. Okay, so this is like the hand being stopped in midair. Then I'll move forward another maybe 8 frames. And I'll drop the hand down. Drop the rotation down just a little bit. I'll drop the body rotate down. Drop the head back down. And I'll drop that one down. And what this is doing is just giving a nice follow through. and I'll select those keyframes and hit F9. So if we go back into our curve editor, what we want to see is as we have this big movement here of him coming into the final aha moment, we want that to be pressed up against this. So it's going to go boom, and then it's going to spring back up. So watch this. We'll crunch these all the way over. So you have a large hit and then a large bounce. And then it will settle into position. So let's look at that and see how it looks. That's not too bad. I think we're going to have to play with the timing of some stuff a little bit. So first off, let's look at the hand. There's some rotation in the hand that we didn't catch. Oh wait, that's weird. All right, so we need to rotate the hand down like it's been, had a lot of force exerted on it. And we'll pull this in, pull this in, pull this up and over. Okay, and as the hand comes down, what we want is we want the rotation of the hand to go upward. So now let's watch that and see how this hand works, only focusing on the hand. It's not too bad. I think maybe it rotates upward a little bit too quickly. So that as it comes down, boom, we can maybe even push it downward a little bit. And then this, I'm going to select these two keyframes and I'm going to rotate it downward just so that it's not rotating upward too much. Now I'll watch that again, we'll see. Much better. So next we have to break up the head movements. So the head is moving a little too quickly. And we want to have that nice flex to it. So let's look at the rotation. We want the head to rotate backward. Whoops. Before it explodes. See, so whoop, boom. All right, that's going to be really nice. Next, we're going to look at the joystick and sliders portion of it. So as he's coming into his final movement and this head is rotating backwards, we want the position of the joystick or the arcs of this joystick. We might need to move them. So I'm going to come here to the pen tool and I'm going to grab my convert vertex tool. And I'm going to pull this one out and then I'm going to break it and pull this one up. And then hit V on the keyboard and now I can start to manipulate what it's going to be doing. Whoops. And so I want it to move upward. And let's see how it looks if I go up and then he hits down. We might even push it up higher. So now let's just look at that and see how it looks. I think there's a little bit too much going on in the head. So let's change that. I'll take away some of his really hard hit. I'll subtle up this head raise. Let's see if that helps any. All right, looks pretty good. But now that I've kind of animated everything, very uniformly, if you look at all my keyframes, everything is hitting on the same keyframe. If you're first starting off, I would recommend just do that. Don't break it up. But if you want, you can break up a few things. So like this head rotate, I'm going to move over like one frame, and I'm going to grab the last two and move them over another frame. I'm just going to try to break up some of this wiggle so that it gives a little bit more flexibility to the character. All right, looks pretty good. One thing I do not like actually is the head keeps rotating. I do not like that it keeps rotating. Let's see if this will fix it. I guess it makes it a little better. I don't know. I guess maybe the only way to fix that is to add a keyframe. I guess that looks better. I just kind of move these around a little bit. So what I did was, one thing you could do is you could just raise this and he'll rotate backwards a little less. But I lined these two up. And to be honest, I don't know if it does much, but it seems to have worked. All right, and then finally, what we'll do, well, not finally, there's one more step after this, but what we'll do is we're going to animate the position, and we'll do the rotation too. And I just want this hand to kind of move naturally as one arm would. We don't want to get any awkward bends in there. So maybe this arm can go back and down a little. We'll drop it down. And all I'm trying to do is give some subtle movement to the arm. And then we'll hit F9. We'll go ahead and we'll crunch these guys in together just a little bit. Maybe on these last two we'll even them out. All right, now let's watch that. All right, easy peasy. Now finally what we do is once our character has kind of finished their cycle of their acting, we're going to move them back to their neutral pose. If you want to have a long pause here, feel free to do so. The way that you would do it is you would just key all the keyframes. And then once your keyframes are in place, I don't think I want mine that long. Maybe we'll do something like that. Once your keyframes are in place, then we will now copy and paste our original keyframes back at the end of this action. So what we're doing now is we're creating a full loop. This is like a 3-second loop. So a character does one gesture, or actually it's a sequence of gestures. And then they go back to neutral. And going back to neutral is very important. Make sure that you copy your keyframes from the beginning and place them at the end. If you do not do this, this whole process won't work. So please, please, please be sure to do that. Now, such a subtle movement, I could probably get away with just a few keyframes, so let's do that. And I'll speed up the action a little bit so that he'll ease into the movement, speed through it, and then settle in. So we have a nice large peak here. So now let's watch it, see if that's any better. All right, not too bad. I could probably pull it out a little bit. It's maybe a little fast. And also, this hand rotation, let's select the hand position. And let's have it curve downward. So now as he comes back, his hand will drop. And then also we can adjust the rotation again. So as his hand comes down, the rotation will go upward. Whoops. Now let's watch it. I love it. I think it looks great. All right, guys, we got one action out of the way. Now let's go for another one. Now we're going to do another action. It'll probably be quite similar to the one that we just did, only we'll do the right hand instead of the left hand. And I'll try to do this one a little quicker, so it'll be a very fast kind of gesture. So now that we have a beginning and an end, which is about a 3-second cycle, you can actually, what I'll do is we're going to duplicate these keyframes. So I'm going to give a little space to it. So we're going to restart by basically adding a keyframe, and we'll have this little middle section here. And it kind of drops, which I don't think I want, but I don't know if there's a way around that. Let's find out. Maybe if we copy and paste these keyframes, will it fix it? No, it did not. So sometimes that happens whenever you have curves in your action. It places these little extensions, and it's basically trying to keep that Bezier curve to it, which is not always helpful, especially when you want to have a hold. So in some places, like on the body, and it looks like this hand here, you just have to go back through and pull them back to 0. So by holding Alt on the keyboard, you got to find the right handle. There we go. Hold Alt and you can break it. And then I'll select this one and then move that one back to 0. Okay, and let's see if there's any other places. Looks like both the body and the head. All right, so we're gonna find these guys and we're gonna fix them. That's not the one. We want this one. We'll put it at 0, or at least close to it. If there's a little movement, I don't care. That's not the one. Since we're dealing with this section here, it's going to be these two keyframes. And we'll put it down to 0. Now it's time for the head. All right, this head has a big one. Put it right there. We'll select the other keyframe, and then we'll manipulate that guy. So it's a little frustrating that there's this redundancy and this kind of curve in there, but now we've fixed it. So I'll hit B on the keyboard, and then we're going to do, let's do like, I don't know. For the first move, I want this to be around 1 second, no more than 2. And I think maybe I'll have him he'll go up, but I want him to kind of like arc backwards a little bit. Then this will come up, and we can even turn it. We'll move that, and then we'll turn it. And the hand will come up. We'll rotate it into position. And we'll pull this hand back since we're at it. Okay, so we have a movement. Let's see it. All right, so we have one pose, 2 pose. And I guess I'll have the hand drop again. I'm all about this hand drop. It's kind of like I'm talking here. All right, and on the hand drop, we'll drop the body a little, drop the body rotation a little, and we'll drop the head a little. And then the hand will come down. Okay. And I have yet to actually put a change in the head rotation. So let's go ahead and we'll move this guy around a little bit. And let's play with our speeds. So if we come in here, we'll see that it's not very uniform. So hit F9 on the keyboard. And then we are going to crunch it in. Crunch it in. Let's pull it out here and let's just see. Okay, that looks great. And again, what we're going to start to do is embellish some of the movement. So let's look at the head and we'll look at the rotations. So as the body goes back, I want the head to rotate forward or rotate downward. Let's go into the curve editor and we'll pull this up to get that head to start rotating forward. So now as he comes forward, his head's going to rotate down and then spring upward. And if we look at our head rotation, we have the same thing happening there too, only I'm going to extend it downward a little bit more. So now let's look at the head. It's pretty good. There's a nice spring to it. Okay, looking pretty good. And then here on the downward movement, I'll leave the head rotated as is. We need to have a rotation on the hand downward. I don't need to move that wrist, I don't think. And then the head rotation, I'll just push down. So then I'm going to select all of these points, and I want to have another very strong accent to it. Whoops. So I'll hit F9 over here, and then I'm going to push these all the way over. And then I'll even push this over a little bit too. And then coming forward maybe about 10 frames or 8 frames or so, we're going to start to spring things upward. So maybe just 2 little clicks. It doesn't have to be much. Doesn't need to be much, but just enough to feel like it's not a static, just settled pose. Right? There needs to be a little vibration to it. And the head will leave. I did the hand. Okay. Yeah, we'll leave that. Okay, and then what we'll do is we'll hit F9. We'll come in here, and then we're going to crunch these over in this direction. And then next what we're going to do is we're going to look at the rotation of the hand. So because we have some big movements happening, what we're going to do is I want this to rotate backwards a little bit, and then ease in. And this one I want to move upward. Let's see if we can get it to look right. And then it's going to explode into position. Let's just see how this looks. All right, that's pretty good. It's really subtle. I don't like the rotation now, so I'm going to put it back where it was, and then I'm actually going to move to maybe about here. And the easiest thing for me to do is just to rotate the hand upward. And then right here is where it's going to crunch. So like 1 frame before it hits, it'll be upward, rotated up. And then about 2 frames forward is where it will rotate down. So now if we come back into our curve editor, we should have a very sharp spike coming into here where everything's crunched over. Okay, and then this one will just hit, this one will hit F9. Let's get in there and look at it. It's kind of offset. Okay, we can push this down here, and we'll crunch this one over. So it's almost like a heart monitor beep, you know, beep, beep. Psh. So let's look at it and see how that does. There we go. Much better. It might even have a little too much spring to it, so we'll pull that out. So let's look at it. All right, easy peasy. Now, I'm sorry for saying easy peasy. For some reason, it keeps coming out of my mouth. Now what we're going to do is we're going to settle back into our neutral pose. So right here at the end, I want to make sure I have a keyframe for everything that I'll move forward a few frames, maybe to 10. And I want to make sure everything is copied into position that needs to be. All right, so now let's watch this. Okay, and then from here, what we can do is we'll do about the same amount of keyframes. This looks to be about just under a second. So if I go to here, I'm going to copy and paste all of my keyframes back into my neutral pose. And so when I watch it, let me just see how curves look. It's just a nice uniform bump, which is fine for some things, but that's not what I want. I want that nice, snappy animation. So let's watch it and see what happens. This should be the final section for action number 2. All right, then it eases back into the neutral frame. All right, and so the final thing we're going to do is with this hand here. Instead of it just coming straight through, I want it to arc maybe downward. So we'll pull this around, make that feel nice and weighty, and then we'll look at the rotation. And as the hand comes down, the rotation of the hand will go up, just like so. I'll put these back. All right, now let's watch it one more time and see the final product. All right, it rotates a little bit too much for my liking. But overall, the action is very smooth, it's very clean, and I think it's generic enough that we can duplicate this over and over again to where people aren't going to watch it and get bored. Okay, so now we have 2 action sequences, and they're looking really good. Now that we have our whole acting sequence animated out, I have just over 11 seconds of animation, which is pretty fast to do in the time that we've done it. So what we get to do now is we're going to set up boundaries for each one of these actions, and it's at this point that you are definitely going to need Duik Basel. If you do not have Duik at this point, go download it and return here so that we can actually set up your markers for your animation. This is called marker animation or trigger animation. And what we're doing is we're going to set up a command that triggers a set of animations or a set of actions. So the first thing that we're going to do is up here in Duik Basel, click on this rigging arm and then come down here to this little thing. Make sure that you're in links and constraints, not in create structures, but links and constraints right here in the middle. And we're going to go to animation blender. So there's a lot of stuff in here, and I'm going to walk it through you real easily. The first thing we're going to do is composition to set up. So we're going to do the eyedropper because we're in the composition that we want to set up. And then we want to control the character within. Okay, so we're going to do the eyedropper for both. And if you have multiple characters or multiple compositions, it might not register. So do the eyedropper and then do refresh, and it'll pick it up. The next thing that we're going to do is we're just going to hit blend. There's this little thing here in the things where you can do all animated properties, which is what we want, or you could select the properties that you want. For now, we're just going to leave it as is, and I'm going to hit blend. Now what blend does is it creates a new controller, which all of these attributes are attached to. Your position, rotation, all of these keyframes are now attached to this. Okay, so that's great. So now we have, and what I'm going to do is I'm just going to rename this. You can name yours whatever you want. I'm going to call it just acting, you know. I would probably name it whatever your character's name is if it has a name. And then so the next thing we're going to do is we're now going to set up our boundaries. So right here at frame 0 is the beginning of action 1. Now what we're going to do is fast forward to the end of action 1. Where does it end? And that's right here. And if you hold shift, it should lock you in. Now that we're at the end of action 1, hit N on the keyboard. And what we're trying to do is we're trying to get your work area in alignment with action 1. And once it's done like that, what we can do is I'm going to call this action. I'll just leave it as action. And then what we're going to do is hit set. And what happened is that Animation Blender has set this action for this amount of time. It says this is the beginning of the action, this is the end of the action. And if you come here to the beginning, you can rename it action 1. Each one of your actions has to have a unique name to it. If it doesn't know how to play it. So the next thing we're going to do is come to the beginning of action 2. Hit B on the keyboard, and then move forward on the timeline to the very end of action 2. And this is why I've created that bumper there, so that it's easier to line up your action sequence. So now that we're at the end, hit N on the keyboard. We're going to hit set over here in Blender. We're going to double click and rename it to action 2. Then we'll fast forward to this one, hit B on the keyboard, and this one's going to be a little different. So I left a space in here. I left a space, and the reason I left a space is so that we can kind of set up when he turns and when he turns back. So we'll hit N on the keyboard, hit set, double click, this will be action 3. And then do page down, hit B on the keyboard. Or actually, oh nice, I set that up perfectly. Okay. So this is where he'll start to turn, and this is where he ends. Where does he end? Right here. Awesome. So we have this nice pause in the middle. That's great. So he turns, pause, and this is going to be our action 4. So action 4 is really just going to be him turning back to his neutral position. And then right here at the very end, hit B and then come all the way over here. And then this will be our final action. This will be action 5. So now that we have all of our actions specified and their timeline and ranges have been set accurately, here's how this whole thing works. So this controller at the very top, which is called C Blender Acting, this is what triggers your animations. And in case you're wondering, no, it doesn't loop your animation. Well, you can loop, I'm sorry. You can loop your animation. But what I'm saying is that it's not just going back to frame 0 and replaying it from 0 to 1, 0 to 1, 0 to 1. It's not doing that. What it's doing is it's actually remembering those keyframes and playing them at any point in the timeline. And the reason that's important is because it allows you to do things like lip sync to a unique performance using the old keyframes. So it's not a time remap. So if you were to do something like a time remap, you'd only be using that section of keyframes over and over and over. So there's a little difference to it, but it's a huge, impactful difference if you're doing something like lip sync. Okay, back to it. The way this works is you go to any point on your timeline, on your keyboard, over by the number pad, there's a asterisk. If you hit the asterisk, it sets a keyframe. Or a marker, I'm sorry, it sets a marker. You can also, can you right click? Let me see, layer, marker. Can we get there? Yep, marker. Okay. So if you right click on there, you go to markers and then add marker. And you can see right here it says number pad star. Cool. So now that we have a marker, what you're going to do is double click the marker, and this is where we write our action. So I'll do action, let's do 2, and hit OK. And you'll see what happens is when you play it, it's going to hold on the keyframe until it hits the marker, and it's going to go, oh, action 2. I know what that is. And then it's going to play it. And it does the whole sequence. All right, so when I found this out, it was a game changer. It was like mind blown. Oh my gosh, this is going to make animation so much easier. And then if you come here and do another one, we can go to like action. You know, you can jump around. That's the cool thing. Action 5. So now we're starting to break up our performance. And this is a very powerful tool. And what's awesome is that, let's say that you have another character, and that character is using the same rig that this one is. You can copy all of these keyframes and add it to the new character. So now if you do an acting sequence for, let's say, George, you can use that acting sequence for Sally. As long as their rig is identical or very close to identical. So there you go. Pretty cool stuff. And again, like I said, this doesn't affect the lip sync. So if you have a joystick and slider like I do, you can still add your lip sync to whatever dialogue or audio you might have. And then at this point, what I would probably do is I would probably hand animate my blinks, and then I would add my blinks throughout, separate from the Blender animation. Simply because if you only do Blender animation, there's going to be weird pauses where he's not blinking, or maybe they're blinking too much. So you want to have like the ability to change the blink percentage whenever you need to. And also, if there is something that you want to just kind of delete, like I have these eyes here moving with this action, what you can do is hit Alt, hold Alt on the keyboard, and then click, and then it erases the code, right? And so now you can move the eyes around however you want to. I would just delete those keyframes. And you can have your character looking around, up, down, whatever you want. And it all animates in real time. So that's pretty cool. And then let's see. So let's say that I was bringing in a new character. So let's say I have male character 2. And let's say that male character 2 has no animation. Nothing to it. Well, how does this whole thing work? Well, it's really cool. So as long as I have no keyframes and everything's deleted, what I'll do is I'll come back into male character 1, select all my keyframes, then come over here to this animation trigger, and right here is a little button called copy. Hit copy. It's going to copy all your keyframes, and then coming back into character 2, I'm going to paste my keyframes where they need to go. And then hit OK, and then don't worry about script alert. And there you go, guys. That's how you copy your keyframes to another character. And then the way that you would set this one up is to go back to your animation blender use your eyedropper, and then we're going to blend. And so now this blender was made using this new composition, which is male 2. And then I can come here and do the asterisk on the keyboard or the star or whatever you want to call it and do whatever actions I need. And now it should work. All right, and so that's how Animation Blender works. It's an amazingly powerful tool. It's really great if you have a long form series that you're animating or a character that you're reusing and you continue to use quite a bit often. So yeah, I highly recommend it. And then also a little side note, for whatever reason, I haven't found a way around this yet, but let's say that you create a set. You got this awesome background that you made in After Effects or Illustrator or whatever. If you decide that you want to import your character into that set, for whatever reason, Animation Blender does not work. It breaks, it doesn't respond, it doesn't listen. So the way to get around that is you open your character that already has Animation Blender in it, and then you import your sets. You import your backgrounds and all that. Once you do that, you can then import new characters into that file. You can import new backgrounds into that file, but you have to first start with that character. And it's a little quirk. There might be a way around it, I'm not sure. That was an issue I had, and the only way I could find the way around it was to import all my assets into that file. So that's just a little side note. Anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed the video. I hope that this was very useful to you guys. I hope you learned some really cool stuff. And I cannot wait to see what you guys have created. Anyway, thanks for watching, guys.
Thanks for watching, guys. I hope that this tutorial was very useful for you. I hope you learned some new things. If you have any questions, put them in the comment section below. And also, if you want to take the whole course and you feel like this was a good starter point and you want to learn more, take my Skillshare course. Again, the links are in the description below. Anyway, have a great day, guys. Thanks for watching.